Okay, we're starting here. This is episode 7. I'm going to talk for a second. This is going to be a little interesting. The girls aren't here today. I'm still going to include it in the Father and Daughters podcast, but this is also probably going to turn into a documentary, kind of a project that I've wanted to make ever since I was in school. I kind of tried to make it when I was in school, but I just couldn't do justice to it, and I wanted it to be more in depth. So here I am actually potentially starting doing stuff for that. And so it's me and Justin today. This is my buddy Justin. Me and Justin have known each other since we were essentially I think it was 22 or 23 years old. We both answered the same ad in I think I answered in Craigslist ad for VIP Taxi in Eugene here, wanting to hire drivers. And at that time I was working in a kitchen, both cooking and doing delivery driving stuff. And I've met a guy who told me, hey man, he actually told me, check out the Craigslist ad, because I just filled out an application and I don't remember if we ended up ever working with him. I can't remember now. But he was the one that told me I was working with him, and he was like, hey, I've started doing it and it's good. They're still hiring. And so I started the process, and me and Justin, I think, ended up starting 2 weeks apart. And within a month or two, we were working acquaintances and became buddies. We're sitting at a poker table here because I feel like our friendship developed a lot between driving a taxi and then sitting at a poker table. We traveled together. We played in a lot of tournaments. And so we've known each other for a long time. So Justin, say hi and whatever.
Hey, how you doing, Michael?
Good.
We started the Texas Hold'em revolution in 2005 or something.
It really was.
No, or something.
We followed that. It was Moneymaker. It was ESPN.
It was. We were definitely in the beginning. I wouldn't say we were going to the World Series of Poker in the 90s, but we definitely were ahead of the curve as far as playing cards and playing Texas Hold'em before it was a big thing on ESPN.
Because we were playing when Moneymaker and ESPN was really promoting Texas Hold'em and the World Series of Poker that became a really big series on TV while we were playing poker. So it was really cool. I was interested in watching it because we played, Yeah,
we got to see it go from a little tiny thing in Vegas of 100 players that you never heard of to tens of thousands of players.
Even
going from home games to bars having tournaments to legitimate card rooms opening up that became legitimate businesses. But
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Even in our town, because nobody played poker. It was just people having buddies over and home games and that kind of thing. And then it literally became a business. People were opening up hosting businesses, doing the tournaments in bars, and then it blew up all over town. And it was karaoke for a while. Bigger than karaoke, bigger than game night was poker nights,
Yeah.
We'd cram 200, 300, 400 people into a bar and play poker for 8 hours,
Yeah, I want to get back to what you said, though, about how we met, because I was going on my way here, going through my head about that and how long ago it was and how different times were. So what I remember was it was right after 9/11, and I moved back here after graduating college and coming back here, having some odd jobs, working with my brother and stuff in a seasonal job, coming back here and not having any idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I was washing dishes at a cafe and refereeing 6th grade boys and girls basketball. And I remember, answering an ad and getting on the phone book. This is when the yellow pages were a real thing, and calling all of the cab companies, and VIP Taxi was the biggest, best company. And it was just fate to call that company, get that job, and it, because at the same time I was doing that, I was thinking about going back to school to be a teacher. I was 90% of the way done with my application and interview process to go back to grad school, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I always thought teaching would be something I liked.
Yeah.
And a week before I turned in my final application, I got the job driving a taxi, and it just stuck. Something about it stuck. And I think you got to be a little independent thinker / not traditional person that wants to work in an office, because cab driving is just something about it I liked. A little bit of it was the money and the hustle part of it. You just got to be a little bit of a hustler and a little bit of kind of a psychopath, really, because you're working 12-hour days. It's long days. You don't know if you're going to make $50 or $250. But what I think we liked about driving the taxi, and also about poker, what they can relate, is that you're kind of hustling, you're kind of trying to get as much money as you can in that session or whatever. It's like you start with nothing or whatever. You start with a little bit, and you end up grinding it out and not breaking the rules, but pushing it as much as you can to make as much as you can. You're a hustler.
The system made us do that. The system essentially was like, you have to push and hustle if you're going to be successful. Because the system it was a good evolution system where it's like every single day we started with zero, and we had a nut to make in order to pay our lease, pay our gas, and then make money. And most of the guys barely made that nut and made a few dollars over the top of it. And they were the guys that would make it a couple of months and then wash out. And we did it for years, because if you're a nice person and you hustle and you did good and you were quick, you made a lot of money and it was good. Yeah, it wasn't always consistent, but we did it because it was consistent enough. Yeah, you didn't know if you were going to make a $50 night tonight, but I know I didn't make a lot of $50 nights or I wouldn't have been doing it, kind of thing, And so
there was a weird competitive thing about it too. We talked to each other about what we made that week or that night or whatever. And there was a little bit of competition, but it was also, you could tell which drivers were the hustlers and which ones just didn't get it. And
my dad did it. I got my dad a job at VIP Tax, at Oregon Tax. No, when I was an owner-operator, I got my dad a job because I was like, Dad, you make good money. It's a consistent job. You can work for me. You'll have a good car, that kind of thing. Yeah. My dad is an hourly working mill worker, simple-minded guy. He spent a lot of time goofing around, spent a lot of time smoking cigarettes and taking breaks and that kind of thing. Yeah. And you couldn't do that. You had to be in your car. You had to be hustling for 12 hours. You had to be grinding for everything you could get. You couldn't sit back as like an hourly worker and milk the clock and take breaks and not be accountable and make good money doing that job. And my dad was not successful. My dad worked for me for like 6 months and said that he couldn't make any money and didn't do it anymore. And that was interesting because I went out and drove the same car he drove and made good money, So
when I talk to drivers and they're like, I had to pay $50 out of pocket just to pay the lease, that baffled me. I know there were some slow nights when I didn't make very much money, or if I quit early, I'd walk home, maybe even or only bringing in like $40, $50 profit. But I could tell when a driver wasn't going to make it, wasn't going to hack it, because after a month, they would say, man, I had to pay to work this week.
Yeah.
It's like,
the only times I ever paid to work
what are you doing out there?
Was when I wanted to go home early. That was the only time I ever. But usually, even if I wanted to go home early, I would come in and make my nut and then go home and just count it as a wash. But there was only like 2 times in my entire career as a taxi driver that I worked my full 12-hour shift, did everything I could, and only made like $15 or $20. That only happened like twice. My lowest, I think, was $9. I think I worked a 12-hour shift and took home $9. And that was horrible. That was like the shittiest night ever. But that only happened a few times. I learned a lot of things. It's interesting. I don't know where to go with this because you just brought up, like, it was interesting. In our careers as taxi drivers, we started driving. I had a cell phone, but most drivers didn't have a cell phone in 2002. So most drivers were just out there with no cell phone, no GPS. I remember when I went to work my first day, I brought a phone book and a little foldable map that I had. And that's how I went for a long time. That was the only way to find things, was look it up in the phone book, find the address, look up the address in your map, and then go find it. To literally, we didn't take credit cards. Everything was done by cash. There was no like POS systems and that kind of thing. Like we went from completely analog taxi drivers to getting cell phones, to getting GPS systems. I remember when all the guys would come in with their fancy little GPS systems in their cars and stuff. And then all of that stuff. We watched the world of technology and whatever unfold from us as taxi drivers.
That's what's interesting about our generation. I think I'm a little bit older than you, but our generation is that in between generation of the, I guess we're Gen X, right?
I was born in 79, so
I was
I'm
born in
that
78.
Yeah,
so
we're in that special zone.
Yeah, my brother's 9 years older than me, so we're these cusp type people. So we lived the generation before cell phones, and we lived through the revolution of the technology and the internet. So we knew what it was like to have a map and go, oh, Willamette Street is, and 29th Avenue is on G7 of page 34, and Mulligan's is right there. And so you'd have to learn by doing. You didn't have a computer to tell you where everything was. You learned by experience. That was the other thing that I think made some people better and faster than others, is their ability to adapt and learn the town and all that kind of stuff.
It taught me evolution at its finest point. Like between the poker table and the taxi, I learned more about life because I got to sit and have conversations with thousands of people, both in my taxi and at the poker table, from all vast walks of life, from a poor person trying to get to their methadone clinic to a rich guy going to pick up his BMW from partying last night. Like, we had conversations with everybody. And then at the poker table, it was the same thing. Guys with no money trying to live their dreams, a guy with all the money just pissing it away at the table for the fun of it. We've gotten to interact with so many more people than the average person gets to interact with in life living. And
when you say you're like, people become experts after like 10,000 hours of something, you know, we have 10,000 hours of interactions, social life, these tiny little 2 to 15 minute little vignettes, little pieces of time in someone's life. And we get to see like where they live, where they're going, what they're wearing, what do they tip, how do they interact with you? Are they rude? Are they nice? Are they talkative? Are they quiet? And sometimes they'll tell you their life story. Sometimes they'll say 2 words to you. And when you start to have that 10,000 hours of interactions, you start to also see patterns and see like human behavior and stuff like that. And you can fall into the trap of stereotyping people, and some of those stereotypes are there for a reason, whether it's, you know, drunk college kids or rich people up in the hills. You know, if you've given thousands of frat boys rides home, you know, you tend to start to judge people a little bit, mostly just in the sense when you're a cabbie, are they going to puke in my car? Are they going to pay me? Are they going to be a pain in the ass? Nothing really judgmental as far as, are they like good or bad, evil or holy people.
No, that's what I was going to say. Not judgment. Like, I wouldn't judge them, but between sitting at the poker table and sitting with somebody in your car after 2 seconds and having the ability to get a sense of that person. What is that person's aura? Are they going to be a nice person? Are they educated? Are they in a stressed out position right now? Like, I got to where sitting at a poker table, when somebody would sit down, within a few minutes, I could tell you who that person was. When somebody would get in my car, within a few sentences of them talking, I had a pretty good sense of being able to tell you exactly who that person was, kind of like, not exactly, but like kind of like a mind reader would do, or a fortune teller. Like, when you're around enough people and you have that, again, it was interesting because we all got to play these little characters. And I think the better you did it, the more money you made, because we would come into someone's little life for a few minutes, and If you're having a party, you got to be the party guy if that's a party customer. If this next customer you're picking up and they're sad and crying, well, now you got to be a counselor. If you pick up a business person and they're on the phone and you get the sense that they don't want to talk to you, you shut up and don't bother them. So it's like this, how can you adjust who you are around so many different people? We would pick up 15 to 30 people a day, 5 days a week, and have 2 to 10 minute interactions with all of these people. And that is very interesting to me. That's something that most people don't do.
The good drivers could read the situation and do whatever they needed to do to optimize
my phone or my watch. I forgot about that.
Optimize, the service to get a good tip. Or it's about getting a tip, but it's also about just being efficient, getting a point A to point B, because you want to burn and turn. That
was my thing. I got lots of compliments on helping customers. I helped customers to help customers, but I also helped customers because the faster I got those people in my car and got them out of my car, I could get onto the next ride and make more money. So there would be so many times where I'd pick people up and they'd be like, oh man, the last guy would refuse to pick us up because we had too many bags or there was too much stuff or something. And I was like, if I'm here, get your stuff in my car, let's get you to the next place. I had kind of that Tony mentality where Tony was just like, let's get it done,
9 times out of 10, it's a win-win. If you help a little old lady with her groceries, you're going to get a tip and you're going to get her happy and calling back the company again and saying how nice the drivers are. And you get them out of the cab and moving on to the next ride.
That's it. You would waste so much time if you got there and you argued with them and you made them feel bad and maybe you didn't pick them up, but now you wasted a bunch of your own time. Like it's one of those things to me, being a cab driver and just doing that showed if you're a good person kind of or not. Because there would be people that would try to take advantage of you or abuse the system, but it was your job to react to it. And if I'm there and you just need a ride and you got money, I'll help you get your stuff in the car and we'll get you out of here, where another guy would have sat and complained or pissed and moaned, and what would that have done, Well,
there's definitely a lot of characters that would drive taxis that would also take advantage of certain situations too. And you can, there's different ways to hustle. You can hustle the way we're talking about. You can also hustle people by, it's the cliche, but you can hustle people by going the long way. And a ride to the airport that I would just take someone would be $25 and it would be $40 for this other driver that was a shady driver. So that kind of stuff happened, and that's a bad stereotype of cabbies, that they're shady and they rip people off. But everybody kind of had their hustle. The other one, obviously was a lot of drivers would do their personal rides and stuff and give all the other service industry people rides who were huge tippers and stuff like that, right?
You could work that angle.
And then, so there was a lot of there's a lot of ways, or more than one way to hustle in that job. But that job, I feel like it kind of spoiled and ruined me as far as not wanting to work for anybody else, not wanting to work in a boring place that is super repetitive and super locked into a room all the time.
That's why I still to this day, but I don't think I ever wanted that. That's why I went to the kitchen. Again, we've talked about this on the podcast, like growing up religious, getting married. Justin's lived a totally different life than me. So I came into the system totally differently, but definitely I was an entrepreneur type. I wanted to figure myself out, but the taxi gave me that. Like, we can talk about that, but we probably need to start talking about the other stuff. But talking about, like, for me, there was a lot of people that would stereotype us as just a cabbie or something like that. But in Eugene, Oregon, in our small little town, it is a college town. And there were stereotypical cabbies that we would see work for us. But most of us around here were just, it was a good job. We made good money. Yeah, you work 12 hours a day, but most guys only did it 3 or 4 days a week. See you later. You do. Most of us, did it 3 or 4 days a week, but I did it 6 or 7 days a week because that's why I did the job, because I was married with kids. But there was not the normal stereotypical cabbie stuff for us. I didn't feel like I felt like it was a different environment. We were very much a family. We were having fun. It was interesting, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. I do think that driving a taxi in this town was probably a different experience than driving in a bigger city.
Oh, for sure.
And our first job at VIP Taxi was like Ruth was like our mom. You know,
she ran it out of her house.
Ran out of her house.
Yeah.
She could be tough, but she was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
You know, and she built it up from the ground, and it did feel like we were a team, partly because we were dispatched over a CB radio and we had to work together and cooperate.
Yeah, we were a team. We were a team.
And we bonded and we worked together even though we were all independent, and we would take home whatever we made, we'd still work together. So it wasn't quite as cutthroat as probably a New York or a place where it's all being flagged down and it's all a race and stuff like that. I mean,
no, we would help each other out, send each other rides.
There were times when another cabbie would steal your ride at 2 a.m. in the morning because they pulled up to the bar and they grabbed your ride that you were dispatched there for. It would happen, but it was a small company where we all knew each other and we were a team, and it's, it was interesting because, I feel like when we started there, like you were saying, it was some guys that were like career cabbies, but it started growing and it started being younger guys that were not your typical cabbie and kind of ambitious and hardworking and did work together well. And I kind of think that's why we got picked by Chuck and Jonas and Barry to help start the next company, because, Ruth was a small business owner, and that went from driving school buses to starting this cab company, and had some like lifer cabbies, but as she expanded, maybe she expanded too fast. And that's why these other guys came in and realized that there was an opportunity, and they saw us as like these young, hungry group of guys that got along well together and worked well together, Yeah. So I think that's how it started.
So let's break into that. That was a good thing. So I'm going to ramble for a few minutes and Justin can cut me off, but I'm going to kind of give a broad overview. So we got about another half an hour, 45 minutes. I don't want to take up too much of Justin's time, and I don't want this to go too long. I feel like if we want to do more details, we can. But so another thing I want to tell. So me and Justin started working for VIP Taxi. Sweet little old lady. We helped her build. I think when we started working, she was working out of her house. She had an alleyway behind her house, and she parked 6 cars in that alleyway. Within a year or two of us working with her, she had got a bigger building. She had like a parking lot, because now I think we were up to, I want to say 10 or 12 cars when we made the split and Oregon Taxi started. So we'd kind of almost seen her double her business or double her fleet in a couple of years.
Where did she move? I don't remember.
It was when she moved on. I'm pretty sure she went straight from her house to Garfield. When we quit, and from where that Garfield office was, where the LTD building is now and the Ride Source building is, that was the building she moved into, and we had that parking lot, and Eric had his little office that he had. And
we went to a central dispatcher.
Yeah. So she grew. She doubled in size. Yeah. I was a dispatcher out of the car. I was a dispatcher out of the office. I trained all of the dispatchers that worked in the office. I was an integral part of that. I worked in the office. You were more of just a driver. You stayed just a driver. I went because I needed hours. I was married. I had twins at the time. I had just gotten married, and we just had twins. I was working like 80 to 90 hours a week because I would drive my 3 to 5 days a week driving, and then I would dispatch a couple other days a week, and that was how I made my money.
I worked 5, sometimes 6 days a week, but yeah, you guys,
I worked for almost 2 years, 7 days a week, where I was dispatching or driving every single day, and I almost went crazy.
Can I digress for 1 second? You just brought back a memory of, I tried driving and dispatching one time, and it was one of the hardest fucking things I've ever done. We can cuss, right?
Yeah, I don't care.
So I don't think people realize how crazy that job was, because
I'm a fucking renegade, in case you're wondering.
We were dispatched over CB radio, and people would call. There was no smartphone, so people would call for a taxi, and they would. So you get in the phone book. You get in the phone book. You dial up a cab company. You'd say you were at the airport, or you'd say you were at the University of Oregon, and you would talk to a person all over a CB radio that was driving a taxi, sometimes with a customer, and you would be talking on the phone to someone while they're driving, and that person would be talking to you over a one-way radio, so all they could do was talk. They couldn't listen at the same time. So the person on the phone
would always talk over you.
And the person on the phone would be confused because they didn't realize it was a radio. Yeah. So you're talking to someone that doesn't know you're on a radio and doesn't know you're driving. And then when they hang up the phone, you get on the radio and call another taxi driver and say, go out to the airport, pick up Mrs. Smith, flight 472 Delta, and that driver would have to get on the CB radio and say, copy Mrs. Smith at the airport. All that while you're driving and doing cash transactions and stuff. It was an insane job, and you did it. I tried it once. It was an insane job, and we had two guys that were pretty good at it.
Me and Barry.
Yeah.
Me and Barry and Tony. So it was Tony, me, Barry, and Tony. Yeah. Like when I started working, it was Barry and Tony were the two dispatchers, and then I worked my way up, and they let me dispatch, and so I started dispatching. That was the reason that I was brought into Oregon Taxi. Originally, Barry didn't want to bring me in because I had kids and he was worried that I would struggle, but I was the go-to dispatch out of the car guy. Barry didn't want to do it all the time by himself, so he brought me in because I was the only one at VIP Taxi in our group that had dispatched besides Barry, and so they needed somebody over at VIP to dispatch, and so that was why I did it, was because I was a car dispatcher. But yeah, I dispatched out of the car for years on Friday nights with 15 drivers in the car. I had a clipboard that sat next to my chair, and I would have people in my car. I'd be driving across town. I'd be talking on the phone to somebody. I'd be listening to drivers who were clearing and telling them where to go. I was a facilitator of like 20 to 25 people making their living and me handling customers, and that was the craziest time of my life, man.
I just thought of another detail that was insane about that business, was that the phone call would be over the radio. So all the drivers and all the customers
that were in the car
could hear everything that the customer and the dispatcher were saying. It was entertainment. Sometimes it was so funny.
It was awesome. People loved it.
Yeah. It was like entertainment. But a good driver would pick up on some of that stuff and kind of try to be one step ahead.
Oh, I would. That's the way we did. If you weren't paying attention.
And they would know kind of what the dispatcher was thinking and know the rotation.
That was why I was a good dispatcher and why I made it into it, because as a good driver, if you're a good driver, you're listening to the calls that are coming in while you're driving. You're listening to the calls that are going out to the other drivers, so you know which calls are holding. And so there would be times where I would clear somewhere and intentionally drive 5 blocks this way to clear just because I know they would give me this ride that was closer or something, manipulate it.
It was a weird art and science to it that just no longer exists because the technology now is so much better. You don't need it. No. But it was definitely something that became this like skill.
Yeah.
But
it was fun.
Remember, there was some sort of, there was something addictive to making a game out of it, kind of, and like, because it was your challenging income. Yourself.
Again, that's why poker for me. Poker was taxi driving. You're making your money while kind of playing this game, and if you're good at it, you can be pretty successful. And that's what poker was. Poker was, this is a really fun game, and taxi driving was a game. It was how fast can I get around town? How well can I interact with my customers? Listening to music, driving fast, fucking not caring.
Okay, I have a question for you. I might have asked you this before, but how different and how crazy of a driver were you when you didn't have a customer versus when you had a customer?
Oh,
were you an insane driver
No.
when you had no customer in there?
One of those that I didn't want to trash the cars.
Yeah,
no, because you would see the guys that would beat the shit out of the cars and just drive them hard, and that would break the cars. And if the cars were broken, then you didn't have a job.
It was short-sighted to run the cars into the ground.
So even when I thought you were going to say when you were an owner. So I was saying I definitely drove different when I didn't have a customer in the car versus when I had a customer in the car.
Oh, when you were an owner,
definitely
I drove faster.
differently when I owned the car versus when I didn't own the car. But even when I didn't own the car, I wasn't stupid enough to just trash it because now I'm not going to have a job tomorrow.
You didn't beat the shit out of it.
No. I wasn't like you. You and Adam, and you're fucking jumping cars.
Should we tell that story?
I don't want to tell that story now. Maybe you can come on again and we can tell that story.
Okay.
But I want to get Oregon, so I didn't finish. So, me and Justin helped this sweet little old lady grow her business. And then there were two guys in our town that wanted to start their own company. They were a couple of bar owners. They were small businessmen in this town. They were young guys. They were only a couple years older than us when we were in our... Because what do you want... I would say we probably worked for 4 or 5 years maybe for Ruth.
It's... Yeah, I had
When did we start Oregon Taxi?
I had
don't
it all
remember.
down on paper. I would say Oregon Taxi started... Gosh. Was it 2006, 2007?
Has it been going for almost 20 years?
I don't know, because... Probably.
Yeah.
Because when you look back, I don't think we worked for VIP as long as it felt.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. So I would think
might have been
was...
like 3-4 years.
Because I was probably like 22, 23 when we started.
Yeah.
And then we probably drove for, 3, 4, 5 years for Ruth. And then we had a couple of guys that essentially wanted to start their own companies. They sold us on... Hey, you guys are paying too much where you're working. She's taking advantage of you. We're going to give you a really good system over here. We're going to take over the town. We're going to have the nicest cars and the best service and the blah, 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 the blah. They sold us on we're going to do this, but you guys just have to help us essentially steal a town from an old lady.
There was a need for, especially on busy nights and at bar closing in the college town, there was a need for better service.
Yeah.
And they they were savvy enough businessmen to see an opportunity and see a problem that needed to be solved.
Yeah.
And
did they solve it though? Or did they make it worse?
No, they didn't solve it.
No. So that's what I'm saying. So Ruth.
But we were promised some certain things, and they did some good stuff for us, but they definitely didn't keep up their end in the bargain.
Oh, no. I'm saying immediate, when we signed up, they gave us a price and said we would never pay more than that price. And within almost immediately, within a month or two, they were raising the price. They raised it again. They raised it again. They raised it again. And it was one of those things because when we started working for Ruth at VIP, we were paying $75 a shift. I think when we quit, she was trying to get us to pay somewhere like $1.5, $1.10, $1.15, somewhere in that range a day. And we were all protesting that because that was $30 a day, $40 a day. That was a couple $100 a week. She was trying to get it out of us, and we didn't want to pay it, and it was a sense of contention.
Yeah, we felt she was being greedy.
Yeah, and so Chuck and Jonas, that's what they came in as. You guys, we need to get you back to the $75. We'll keep you at $75. There's no reason to ever charge you more than $75. And I want to say within 6 months, they were back up to what Ruth was charging us, if not more, because that's what they said it took to run a company. You know?
Yeah. So I think thing for me and the thing that can be revisionist history is that I heard a lot of promises through Barry or through our buddies Josh and through
there was a lot of that
through the
grapevine
kind of thing. But that being said, as owners, Chuck and Jonas definitely kind of told us one thing, and then when it came time to make changes, they just said, well, this is the way it is. This is the market that, we have to do this to stay in business.
Yeah.
They were always screaming poverty. Like this,
it was always bottom line. It was always profit.
If we can't, well, especially Chuck, he was kind of the tough love guy, or kind of the guy that had to tell us the way it is. It was always like, hey man, we can't keep our doors open if we don't raise the rates.
They would always do that.
We don't raise the rates.
Yeah.
And then they would say stuff like, well, we realize that, this is going to come out of your pocket and it's going to cost you guys a lot of money. So we'll work with the city to raise the mileage fee and stuff like that. And they had the gas fee and all that kind of stuff. So they try to
so what they
patronize us by raising the prices and putting it on the customer. But what I think the taxi business was that sucked is that the owners of the company and the drivers and the customers all had different interests. It's a business where if the company's making money, a lot of money, they're making money from the drivers. And the customers are paying more money to cover the cost of the company, and so that the drivers can make enough money. There was this weird balance. You know what I mean? Like if we charge too much, we get less business. Or if we had too many drivers that paid too much money to the company for leases, the drivers wouldn't make any money.
Yeah.
And then if we had not enough drivers, the company wouldn't make enough leases.
Yeah.
So we were butting heads, There was
to me,
it was we were in constant competition. And the management was always trying to find that perfect balance of enough drivers to get the customers picked up and the company enough money and the drivers making enough money. So I always feel like the drivers were happy when the customers were waiting a half an hour and
they could hustle
and they could
never
hustle.
had to wait. Yeah.
Never had to wait. But the customers were pissed off because they weren't getting rides fast enough. So if we're slow and the customer's getting picked up in 3 minutes, they're happy, but we're pissed because we're sitting and we're getting one ride an hour and we're not making any money.
Yeah.
And
well, to me, so the reason I want to tell this story and the reason I feel like it's relevant to what my mission is and who I want to be is I feel like Oregon Taxi and the taxi business and just the company we worked with is a perfect example of capitalism and corporatism and the modern world. So the company was successful if there wasn't 2 to 5 people that all wanted to make a profit off of that company without actually working at that company. Chuck and Jonas and the other investors in Oregon Taxi didn't work at the taxi company. They didn't drive a taxi. They didn't fix the taxis. They didn't talk to the customers. They didn't do the paperwork. They didn't do anything. They literally just wanted to see a profit for themselves for being an owner of this business. And the business and the customers and the drivers couldn't all be happy paying 2 to 5 people who just want to collect money from a business without ever actually putting, Chuck and Jonas had to have meetings with managers and go over contracts with lawyers. That kind of is working, but they didn't deserve to take home the lion's share of the amount of money from the business by not working at the actual business. And that was my thing, was as my business, I kind of want to get this going, but my business ended up failing with Oregon Taxi because the only way that my business was survive is if I was a driver and an owner and owned multiple cars, I made a good living. But if I didn't want to drive my cars and I just wanted to be an owner, I couldn't make it. So when I had my stroke I couldn't keep my cars full enough and busy enough and pay all my mechanic bills and pay all the extra things that I needed to pay because Oregon Taxi wanted too much money to operate the taxis, and their cut of the franchise fee, or however you want to call it, they wanted to make money off of the back of me, who was actually working, for not doing anything. And to me, that's that you're a slave owner. Like, literally, Chuck and Jonas are plantation owners, and they have a bunch of slaves that work for them so that they can drive Ferraris and they can own multiple houses and they can run for politics and they can vacation all the time. To me, that's what's wrong with our world, and I seen it from the inside. I helped build it and then watched it shit me out when I didn't do it service anymore, you know?
Yeah, they were the money guys. They were the
like, we don't need bros anymore.
And
like,
they were. Well, I think we should back up and a good. Well, this is a good place to talk about what happened as far as what they did and the moves they made. So we were promised this stuff, like our lease, especially the guys that helped start it, wouldn't go up. We were promised, like,
they made a bunch of handshake gentleman deals to get a business started.
I think they realized the hard way too, how much overhead there was and how much regulation there was for owning the cars. So what did they do? They probably hired lawyers. They went to the city council and they went to the state government. When the state government, I think what happening is the state, some cab driver probably filed for unemployment.
Yeah.
And we were independent contractors. And that's one of the beauties for them as owners, that cab drivers are independent contractors, is that you do not pay any unemployment tax. You do not pay any workman's comp tax. You do not pay any Social Security. It's a 1099 job. They get to just cash so checks. all they have to pay for in taxes is like I guess probably some corporate tax, some income tax, but they don't have to pay a lot of the business, the employment tax. Yes, so they don't have to pay employment tax, Social Security tax, unemployment,
even state and federal taxes
SAFE,
for employees,
all that kind of stuff. So when some driver went and applied for unemployment, a red flag came up at the unemployment department for the state, and they came after Oregon Taxi, being like, hey, you're treating these guys like employees and not paying unemployment tax. We're going to fine you. We're going to sue you, and we're going to fine you for this back taxes that you owe to the unemployment in the state. And so what did they do? They said they paid the fines. They said they were going to have to shut down the business. They told us they were going to have to shut down the business for us unless they fought these lawsuits and paid the fines, but made sure, hired their lawyers and talked to their politician friends, that cab drivers stayed independent contractors and didn't get any sort of employee benefits.
Yeah.
And the best way for them to continue to have that status was to sell off the cars, or like 90% of the cars, and make the drivers owners of the vehicles themselves. So you would...
We were essentially franchisees.
We basically bought vehicles that said Oregon Taxi on them, but we owned them and we were doing business as Oregon Taxi, and we owned the vehicle itself, but we didn't own the name. We bought the car and the right to use.
It was essentially, we owned our own
Taco
Bell. We had our own Taco Bell.
Right. So you don't, if you own one Taco Bell, you don't own the company Taco Bell. You don't own the trademark Taco Bell.
You don't own any of the ingredients. You don't own the raw name.
So we didn't own the name Oregon Taxi, and we did not.
We owned the vehicle with all the expense and the overhead.
And then what they did, it was kind of evil genius of what they not only. They paid those fines, but they not only got to keep their 1099 status for their drivers, they also got rid of probably the biggest overhead cost, which is vehicle maintenance.
Yeah.
and they just pushed that onto these new owners and told these owners, which most of them were the same guys that helped start the company, that hey, here's your chance to be an owner, be an owner, be a small business owner, and be part of
our company,
and be invested, be a team, make more money and be invested in this company. And one thing I will say that they did is they were aggressive in advertising, and they were aggressive businessmen. So they did, in 5 years, become the biggest and most popular company in town.
Us. Yeah, because we were rock stars in this town. We kind of were. Like, literally, there was a group of us, knew all the bartenders, knew all the strippers, knew all the party people. We knew drug dealers. We knew everybody because we gave them rides. And we facilitated this if you were good. Like, how many drug dealers and strippers and prostitutes and businessmen did we give rides to and know and that kind of thing? That was really interesting to me.
Zero, no comment.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
no, but yes, we made a lot of friends, a lot of connections. We knew what was going on in this town all
the time. And that was why we were good, you know.
We hustled enough that, and we helped grow that company so much that it VIP Ruth.
We bought her out.
Circle. Yeah, we ended up merging and buying her out, and slowly turned all those blue taxis green. Yeah. And so that was it. Became the biggest company in town. And then so they were politically, that's when they really started to do the kind of their political power moves. It was all of that Department of Employment and 1099 status. And that.
So that's what I say. So me and you, so I want to kind of subtext a couple of things or whatever. Like, there was two things that because I feel like we've got a lot of the details. Like, you know, we helped an old lady, or we kind of screwed an old lady with a couple of big, powerful business guys to start a business. In that business, I seen two interesting things that me and Justin dealt with. We got to deal with our new business owners trying to fight the state in order to keep us 1099 contractors instead of employees. Now today, Uber and Lyft are fighting the same battle with drivers wanting to be not 1099 employees, but real employees. So it was funny, we were a part of that back then with lawyers in Portland and fighting the government, and they were really pushing us, feeding us, but I know for them it was all profit in their favor. They didn't want to let it switch, not because they cared about us, but because it was in their favor.
They would give us a narrative that if we were employees, we would make less money. Either we would make less money or the company would close.
They would just close the door. That was their main thing, was if they were pretty much like, we have to do this or we'll just close. You know, that was definitely it. I don't know if they ever would have, because they're still in business today. And these are two guys that talked about running to run the best, fanciest, nicest cab company in town. And it's the biggest joke, disgrace company in town. I mean, we can go on and on about how a little cab company sent their dispatch overseas to Malaysia or something, where when you were calling a cab company in Eugene, you were talking to someone across overseas.
That was a real genius idea. Yeah. You know, let's have someone 6,000 miles away
who doesn't
speak English as their first language, talk to someone in tiny old Eugene, Oregon, just to save
save a few. Like, I don't even know what they saved.
To pay someone,
and then we
$3 an hour, and they've never been to the town that they're dispatching. No, it's all on a map, and they don't even
understand the names or the street corners or the words that the names are. You know, like pronunciation of street names and stuff. It was crazy. That was after my time.
That was a real. That was crazy.
So the second thing that I want to bring up that me and Justin seen that was very political and very understanding how corporations and people work and manipulate employees and workers is. Uber and Lyft wanted to come into our town about 5, 6, 7 years after Oregon Taxi started. And through politics and going to city council meetings and getting us owner operators and drivers and the employees that worked in the office to petition city council. We went to city council meetings. We did all sorts of our own kind of petitioning stuff. And if anybody in Eugene, Springfield wonders why it took 7 extra years for Uber and Lyft to come into town, you can almost exclusively thank Oregon Taxi and Chuck and Jonas, because they single-handedly stopped pretty much. Oregon.
It's called lobbying.
Yeah, no, yeah.
It's just lobbying.
Yeah.
I think I would love to see the timeline and see when Uber and Lyft started, when they came here finally.
When they first tried to come here, and then when they actually came here.
It was probably they probably held them off for, like you said, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, something like that.
And
I think
it was under the guise too of like, we don't want this big Silicon Valley corporation to come to town and take over this little local company.
Yeah.
And there's, I guess, some truth to that, but they're not a small local company they are compared to Lyft, but they did the same thing to Ruth that they are trying to stop Lyft from doing to them. It's
It's politics.
Yeah.
To me, America did the same thing to the Native Americans that Israel's doing to Palestine right now. We're just watching it on TV, so that kind of stuff, if you want to get political, but I don't want to. So, or go ahead.
It is interesting. Obviously, I didn't, as an owner at the time of a few cars, I didn't want to lose 60% of our business to Lyft.
No, for me, they sold it to us perfectly because I was an owner operator, and it shows me our ignorance. I was scared of something new and different because people told me that my income and my livelihood and my safety essentially could be affected by this external foreign entity that's trying to come in and steal your jobs and steal everything, like we were sold that, like so many other people are sold shit. So.
Well, it was a better technology that was more efficient and faster. We were talking about how old the technology was when we started. Well, we were still using telephones and a big tablet. We were telephone dispatched out of a central call center, and then using a tablet in our taxi that was this weird software done by a small company or medium-sized taxi company that was not efficient and had a ton of bugs in it. Versus
it was almost like a high school kid
versus like a
taxi program
versus it was like DOS or something like that.
Man.
Versus a huge international billion-dollar company with like genius Silicon Valley coders creating this slick app that's twice as fast and
really user friendly. We tried to create our own app, but it sucked.
Yeah. So we I think, like with any kind of, what do we call it, disruptive technology, we were screwed as soon as they came here.
Yeah, no, definitely. I drive Uber.
And the only thing that is keeping that company afloat now is
government contracts
that Uber and Lyft can't do.
Yep.
And that's why I quit. You said, we already talked about you leaving the company for 2 reasons: for health reasons and for just discontent with the ownership.
Yeah.
So I stuck around a little bit longer than you, but I saw the writing on the wall too. It's like, you can't beat them, join them. The Uber and Lyft were just a way better platform, and I didn't want better service, and you could make more money, I think, and you didn't have to deal with all of the bullshit
politics
that Oregon Taxi had to deal with. So
I wanted to go. So I don't know if you want to talk. So that's kind of, I guess, my wrap up thing.
Keep going if you want.
Well, we got like 5 or 10 minutes, but I'm saying, as far as like, if I can get that part out. So I bought in. I can kind of go over like how when I started, I was a single, or we're like young married couple and trying to make it, and then I got sold starting another company, and that kind of carried me on for a little while, and then I was kind of floundering again at one point, and then Oregon Taxi went to owner operator, so that kind of kept me going for a little while. Like, I remember when I first started, and Bob had been driving a cab for 15 years, and I thought it was the saddest thing, and I ended up driving a cab for like 12 or 13 or 14 years, so I was just the same, but it kind of worked out differently. But I ultimately became an owner operator. Within a couple of years of becoming an owner operator, things were very bad. And so part of who I am today and discovering myself was I was a huge advocate for the owner operators. Between the last 2 years that I drove a taxi, I went through a divorce. I was trying to organize and unionize the drivers at Oregon Taxi, and I had a stroke, and that kind of made me have a stroke, I think. But the last little bit that I was really active in Oregon Taxi before I had my stroke was I was advocating. Chuck and Jonas were ripping us off. They were charging us more than I spent like 2 weeks calling every cab company that would answer my call in town or in the country. Not in town, in the country. I called like every state, tried to get a couple of companies in each state to talk to me. And if I could get like a manager type person to answer questions, which I got a list of like 20 or 30 companies that I took to a meeting with the drivers talking about, look at how much an average company gets charged, how much an average owner operator gets charged. And Chuck and Jonas and Oregon Taxi were gouging us at like twice the average rate. So I spent like a year of my time advocating, trying to unionize the drivers, trying to protest Oregon Taxi charging us so much and screwing us over. And then somewhere in that time, I had a stroke. And I couldn't keep paying Oregon Taxi the enormous rates that they were paying because I couldn't drive anymore because I had eye problems after my stroke. And so without ever even talking to me, without ever still not talking to me or seeing me, Chuck and Jonas had Jay tell me that they were no longer going to honor my contract because I wasn't being able to keep paying the amount of money that the lease required me to pay. So essentially I was going bankrupt, I was failing, and they essentially canceled my contract. And that was interesting to me because, again, I helped these guys start this business. I watched them when we started the business. They only owned a couple of bars and a couple of rental properties. And I know how business works now, and I know how that kind of stuff. They made a business, they bought a bunch of cars, they upped our rates, they made our business look really good on paper. Then they leveraged that to start CJ's Eateries. If you live in Eugene and you go want to video gamble, CJ's Eateries, that's Chuck and Jonas. They started Hop Valley, which I'm sure they leveraged a bunch of Oregon Taxi into starting Hop Valley. And so while we were struggling and not making any money and barely being able to survive, these guys are pulling up to meetings in Ferraris and going on vacations and sitting in a meeting with us when we're complaining about not making any money. Remember, they threw the applications across the table to us and were like, if you guys want to quit, we got 20 applications of 20 drivers that want to come work for us right now, and we'll just hire new drivers. And then when we were owner operators complaining, it was the same sort of thing. I got a list of 50 owner operators that want to come, and I'll burn through all 50 of those, and then I'll find more. And so they were all about making money. They didn't care about reputation. They didn't care about any of that kind of stuff. They just wanted to make money. And when it came down to it, they didn't care about people, they cared about business, and they cared about money. And I'm sorry, but that is a broken world. Those are broken people that take advantage of other people. And that is why I'm here today. That's why I'm starting to do what I'm doing, is because I grew up in the church and I didn't like the church taking advantage of people. And we all are forced to grow up in like a capitalistic business system where somebody somewhere is making money off of you. If you're a minimum wage employee at an average place, there's some owner somewhere that's golfing and driving a Ferrari and you are barely able to pay your bills. And to me, that's not okay. Like, I don't want to live in a world where I don't care so much about rich people, but I don't understand how rich people sleep at night knowing that someone is dying from exposure right outside their estate and they could help them. Like, that bothers me. That is my thing, where it's like, it's not so much the rich people. I love innovation. I love America. I love having fun. I love doing stuff. But then again, I don't like taking advantage of people. I don't like hurting people. And I feel like America and government and corporations and capitalism is just using people, making money off of people, and being selfish and not caring about the world, the environment, people. And so this is why I wanted to tell the story, and we can continue talking, but I feel like I got enough of that out, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, we can wrap it up.
Yeah,
I guess.
Or tell me how you feel about that. You know,
I
wanted
agree
some
with.
pushback, you know, like-
I agree with a lot of that,
Okay.
and I think that this is a country where if you work hard, you're supposed to be able to at least have a roof over your head and support your family.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that just is really hard to do. I do think, though, that this country is, for a lot of people that work hard, there are opportunities, and but it's not always easy, And for people that do work hard, they can improve their situation, right?
Yeah.
I think that this company that we worked for did give some opportunities to some people, and I made a decent income from them. I mean, I worked for VIP for, like we said, 4 years, and I worked for Oregon Taxi for almost 10 years, and I got some debt, but I also made some money and got out of debt, and I don't know, I'm not able to retire, and I don't do it anymore. So I don't think that it was successful. It was more successful for them than me. It wasn't a successful business venture as far as profit. I learned a lot from it, but I think that they were savvy and smart in that they made money off of things that were kind of recession proof. They made money off of alcohol, gambling, transportation. Yeah. I think they, probably land, like you said, land.
And, they own lots of rental properties.
So they were savvy. And the other thing that was savvy for them in doing the owner-operator thing, and that you touched on, we were never able to organize and create a union or create a situation where we could have a collective bargaining agreement where we made 50% or 51% of the profits, and they made 49%, and there was like a legitimate way to do. They kept us. They like divided and conquered us too. Yeah. So we could never sit down as owners of the cars in a room and agree on anything. Mm-hmm. Really, we tried to organize a couple times, and we could never get organized enough to have any power and leverage over them.
And they knew that. That was what I seen about corporate America too, was that those two used other employees inside the company to kind of manipulate things. And for me too, when I finally got all my information together and I called the first meeting, it was literally like herding cats. Like, we had 125 drivers, and I think like 20 people showed up if I was lucky. And they knew that. They had people come to the meeting to report back how many people showed up, because they wanted to see if we were getting together, because they knew. And that was the reason they wanted to push me out, because I was the one trying to keep people together, trying to get people together. And that was weird,
And cabbies tend to be kind of individuals too.
That's
they don't really want to be told what to do so much. So that's hard for them.
They would bitch and complain about Chuck and Jonas and how things went.
They would.
But whenever I tried to do something about it, they were just like and the same thing's happening now to me with other things. Too many people are like, my daughter said it, how it's like, like life's too short to affect change. And it's one of those like, that's so weird, because literally we can look back in history of how many individual people changed the entire world in their lifetime, And so to me, it's like, the reason that Chuck and Jonas have any sort of power over Oregon Taxi is because they keep everybody separate. And if we all came together, they wouldn't have been able to do that. But they knew that we keep them apart, we keep them separate, we keep them struggling. That's it too. You keep them struggling. And if you're struggling, you don't really have time to fight back. You don't have the energy to fight back, because you're spending too much time trying to pay your bills. You're not worried about doing something,
Yeah. Give them just enough to stay afloat. But
Yeah.
don't.
And to me, it's sick. Like, again, you use words like they're savvy and whatever. And to me, it's interesting because it's like, especially Chuck. Chuck is one of those guys, silver spoon kid, went to school, was like a frat kid, got a business as soon as he graduated high school or college. He's a Trump to me. Like, literally, like, he would talk like he's worked really hard and made a lot of money. But I guarantee you, he's never worked a minimum wage job and had to figure out how to pay his bills at the end of the month. Like, he's never experienced that in his entire lifetime. But he's going to sit and tell me about hard work and money and not being able to survive and pay your bills. And it's like, you have no concept. So to me, why are all the business owners rich people who don't want to work? Why are all the politicians rich people who don't want to work? It's like we have this like ruling class over the working class where all of the workers do the work and we tell the workers that we can't afford to pay them any more money. I mean, that's literally been the story of human evolution, is some rich ruling class person who's never had to work a day in their life tell some poor person that you should be grateful that you get to work for me and you get to live on my land and you get to have my resources and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like we need to evolve out of that. There is nothing in our society that says we need bosses, we need CEOs, we need this. Like they don't do anything. They don't serve a purpose or a function. To me, if we're evolved animals, every human animal is responsible to go gather your own food, repair your own resources, or repair your own like environment in your house and make your environment, your living situation better. Make sure you have plenty of food and that kind of thing. But it's like the only way that you don't have to get up every day and do that is if you create a system where you have other people that do it for you.
Yeah.
That's it. And so to me, it's like if we are science and evolve, we know today evolution is one of the most fundamental and known scientific facts. And so we know that human beings are evolved animals. There's more than likely no gods out there or whatever. We don't know. All that we know is human beings are evolved animals on this planet. And every other animal on this planet kind of lives a certain easy whatever life. Human beings have developed this super complicated, really fancy looking world. But first of all, we're shitting all over the planet that we live in. Like literally we can't maintain our life and not just destroy the planet. And we're literally like a fungus that takes from each other, takes from the world around us, takes from everything. And it's like all of these systems have been put in place by people before us. But now today we're like, hey man, we're all the same people, whether you're Palestinian or Israeli, whether you're black or white, whether you're American or Chinese or something, like we're all just human beings. We all just want to have access to food and resources, except we have a bunch of shitty people trying to exploit us so that they can live an easy, cushy life and not have to work and, that kind of stuff. So it's like, that's my mission. That's what I'm pushing for. That's the kind of things. And, like I would love to have Chuck and Jonas on this podcast. But it's funny to me, the worst people in my life that have done the worst things but are successful don't like to sit down and talk about it. I guarantee you, I asked Jay after I graduated school, I wanted to interview Jay about his basketball stuff. Like Jay was a super cool person to me. I love Jay. Jay was an awesome basketball story. Jay was the one who fired me. Jay hasn't talked to me since he fired me. I literally trained Jay. We sat at poker tables and sat and played poker together. I essentially trained him and worked with him hand in hand. And then Chuck and Jonas told him to fire me, and he fired me, and I've never talked to him again since. And so, again, those are just interesting things that our society creates and things that bother me. That it's like, I asked Jay, I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't anything about him firing me, anything about Oregon Taxi. I needed to do a cool story for one of my classes. And one of my classes, I was going to do this kind of documentary kind of thing that never worked out. But another project, I had to do an interview, and we had to interview someone interesting. And I was like, dude, the coolest person to me right now is Jay, with his story of getting to play basketball again as an adult and be like a superstar and for his kids and all this kind of stuff. It was a super cool story.
Yeah.
And then to be now I don't even know if I respect him, because you literally just still work for the same shitty people doing the same shitty job. And I don't know, so.
Yeah, I wonder how he feels about that company and still working for that company. I did run into him and I talked to him. We caught up a little bit. I thought he wasn't working there anymore, but I don't know what his position is there. He's been there so long. He's probably
gotta be
general manager or something.
He was general manager before, and so
I wonder how much higher he can get. And what they're doing for him, but
I think Barry left, and so Jay probably kind of took over Barry's section of it too.
Yeah.
So but he doesn't drive. Barry drove.
Yeah.
But it was like Barry retired, so now I just picture it's probably Jay, a couple of dispatchers, the accountant, and so Jay probably just runs the show pretty much.
Well, like I said, we can. Start to wrap it up. What time? But
we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes, so I think we're good. So unless you have something. I think
what I wanted to add to what you're saying about society and stuff, I do think power corrupts. It's the more power and influence and money you have, the easier it is to use that for your advantage and get greedy and screw over the little guy, you know? And then, but I don't think it's only capitalism in this country that does it. Communism does it, dictatorships do it, like a lot of civilizations. The leadership takes advantage of the
leadership,
the public. And so I don't have the answer for you of how to fix the problem of corruption and power blinding people and living off the backs of the poor and slaves and blue collar people and destroying the planet and all that. It's tricky. I think that our experience has shown us how kind of the real world in at least in the United States, in little old Eugene, Oregon, works.
Yeah,
it's hard to grow and to get ahead without some of that power and influence and stepping on some little people along the way.
It's tough because I agree. Like I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm not anti-communist. I'm not anti-socialist. I feel, again, we're evolved animals. So we just at one point started making up words to try to describe things. Like I put myself in a position, like imagine your dog. You watch your dog start to be sentient and start explaining things to you. Imagine how dumb your dog would be of how like the world works and how lightning works and if there's a monster around the corner. At one point, we were those fucking people just barely starting to be sentient and like talk to each other. And we were probably scared of everything. So everything that we evolved with came from this pack animal. Like we're pack animals, human beings. We form together in packs. We don't have lots of claws and that kind of thing, so we can't defend ourselves. So essentially human beings are like a herd of deer. We had to stay together in the pack. If you stay together in the pack, you're safer. Mm-hmm. That's what we like to do. And so within that pack, we had to develop, there was one leader, and that's the group think that Christianity, that like religion teaches you, is we're all, imagine a big flock of deer out there, and one of them is in charge, and he's the group think, and we're all going to go this way, and we're all going to do this, and you go to him to ask how things work or how does something happen, and he makes it up to tell you because there's nobody else there to correct him or anything. So there's somebody that just made up stories to tell people how things worked. And we've literally evolved for 100,000 years now, just making up new stories to describe how things work. And we're finally starting to get to a point where science is like, I don't care what you've said for 1,000 years. This is what it actually is because we can prove it today. And now we know, And so it's like, to me, everything that we've had in place came from ignorant animals just trying to figure out how the world worked as we evolved up to this point. Now we're finally here. And so everything we have in our world today was designed by animals, but we don't want to be animals anymore. We want to be humans. We still are animals, but we want to try to be more human animals than animals. So all of these systems in place that steal from each other, that are selfish, that use other things, those are animals playing humans and using humans to their own benefit kind of thing. They're not humans that, because animals are selfish. An animal doesn't care about another animal dying. An animal doesn't care if I'm stealing this food and now you don't have any. An animal only cares about itself and what I need and what I need to survive.
Yeah.
So human beings are the first animals to be like, I will risk my life to help you. I will take some of my food and give it to you. Even though I'm going to be hungry and I'm going to starve, I'm going to give you some of my food. Animals don't do that. So to me, I was talking to Bria about it today. Today we have a world that we live in where there's a lot of really evil, not evil, but not good people that are trying to exploit every resource out of the earth they can, get as much money out of every person they work with as they can. So to me, those are animal humans. I want to be a human animal because a human animal is not selfish. We care about the world. We care about other people. We care about our legacy that we leave on. And that legacy isn't, can I leave you an empire to conquer the rest of the world with? That legacy is, look at us, we made a better world. We're the first species on this planet that can help the world be better. That instead of being this fungus that's just absorbing the planet, we can actually change. But it's like we have all these people that are using it. And then inside of that system, there's people who are starting nonprofits and want to help other people. But those people are so minute, and the system on top of them is pushing down so hard for profits and money. And I can send $1 billion overseas for guns, but I can only give you $10,000 to feed the homeless kind of thing. Like that system that's in place is all about dominating people, and all the people that are in the animal world, human world, trying to be better, they can't because the world around them doesn't let them do it because it's greed and it's that kind of thing. So it's like, to me, that's the big problem is there isn't one right answer. There's no answer. But up until this point, we have a bunch of men, mostly men, being like, I have the right answer. I figured it all out. Follow me or else. And that's the way systems have been put in place. That was the British Empire colonizing things. That was the Roman Empire, was all these like whatever people, like emperors and stuff. Yeah. Like, I have the answer. We all need to follow this system and don't question me. And my thing is I don't have the answer. I don't know what the answer is. I think we're all but a bunch of dumb animals, and there isn't necessarily a right system. There's systems that we can put in place to be better human beings and have a better planet. But there's like, when we have conversations like, oh, what's best for business? Business is a concept that human beings invented. Business didn't evolve in the real world. Business is something like, we have human beings that need to make food and make resources and invent things and do that kind of thing. But a business having to worry about loss and profits and employees and that kind of thing, we invented that. That's a new thing, That's a human construct. So it's not like, how do we make business work better for us? It's, do we even need business? Is business even a concept that human beings needed to have invented? Or is there a better system that works better for all of us, that doesn't initiate greed and doesn't initiate selfishness and owning things, So it's like, again, no animal on this planet owns anything. Owning something is a human construct. And so it's like just the system that we're a part of, that this land that I'm on right now, 500 years ago, wasn't owned by anybody. Now it's owned by somebody. How does that work? Like, I guarantee you some Indian used to set up his teepee right here and hang out, and this land wasn't owned. Now this land is owned and taxes are due and deeds need to be done or whatever. That's all shit that human beings created, Like I told you, we were talking, like, to me, there's not a homeless problem in the world. There's a real estate problem. There's businessmen who are business savvy, who make lots of money off of the backs of poor people in their homes. Instead of, we need people to have homes, not someone to pad their portfolio with people's homes. That's the problem. It's We don't need some rich guy who's already rich to own 50 houses so that he can be richer. We need 50 people who have 50 nice homes and they can live in them, you know? So, all right, that was my ramble for now. You can say whatever you want, but that was my wrap up. So.
Okay, no, it's good, man.
And if you
I
ever come on again and not have
this
another,
conversation a lot. It's a really interesting, great conversation, and I think we both learned a lot from our experiences, and it's good to have these conversations because we can maybe not have the solution, but we can try to be solution-based people that are trying to do the right thing in our own lives. Like you said, maybe we can't change the whole world, but we can change our own environment.
We can affect change. We can start the ball rolling. That's my thing.
So just by having this conversation and doing little things, I think you can, sounds corny, but you can make your world, your space a little bit better, So, and it starts with these kind of conversations. So I had a good time, and I think it's
and that's why I want to do this, because that's why I called it challenging conversations, because these conversations are challenging. That's it. People come in and like to say I have the answer, So it's challenging conversations. It's not about trying to say that I'm right or anybody's right. It's about, I want to talk to people. I want to engage people in why you think that way. Why did you make this decision? Those kind of things. Because nobody likes to be asked why. They just do it. Every politician doesn't ever sit and ask why. It's always a political answer kind of thing. So I felt trapped. I felt like I was going nowhere and I didn't know what to do. And to me, starting another podcast seemed like it was just another drop in the bucket or something. But I know I talk differently. I'm not special, but I say different things than most other people say that I've ever known. And this is my affect change. Yeah, I don't know how to change the world. I don't know how to build a pyramid or whatever, but this is me starting to do something, starting to put my voice out there to hopefully affect change and make the world better. So, I hope you come back on. We don't have to have it be this formal. I definitely was trying to push the narrative in this, but I would love to have you just come back on if you ever want to sit and have a conversation again, if you like it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's good stuff.
Awesome. Perfect.
Fun.
Perfect.
Good time.
Out of here. All right. Cool. Now we're good.